it's hard to sort of, I think another thing that I think about is like, I'm so young, I'm 22, oh God, like how can I envision a future? And I have barely lived enough time, but that's the thing, is that by virtue of us being young, we're gonna have to live in that future. Aloha, my name is Keoni Rodriguez, and I am a person. I'm just trying to do my best. I think I came into caring about the environment in a variety of different ways. I mean, my parents really instilled a lot of those values in me because of where they came from. My mom is from Hawaii and my dad is from the Philippines. They didn't use the language of environmentalism or environmental issues. It was just sort of these instilled values of being mindful of how you affected a place, whether that was, what we traditionally call the outdoors or not. An indigenous person, there's such at the core of it is like an epistemic history of the way that we conceive of the environment, the way that we talk about it, the fact that we use the word environment, whereas in my home communities we don't really have a word that translates to that. And we use like kinship terms to describe the world around us, right? And that, I think, is an indicator of that epistemological dissonance that I think I would like to invite people to think about critically in ways that they might be able to shift for themselves, for others, and the core principles of Hawaiian culture that I'm trying to tease out in my honors thesis is a word called Holeana, which translates to responsibility, obligation. It also refers to plots of land that Hawaiian families historically resided on. And so that land was tied up with these notions of responsibility and obligation. And I think that's sort of a core value that I sort of think about in terms of my relationship with the environment. What is that reciprocal and mutual obligation that I have to the world around me, but also the people around me? Because in our cultural worldview, the people are a part of the land too, right? And it's sort of this big connected system. And so what are my obligations to people? It goes back to what I was talking about with values and relationships. And I think there's a lot of healing that needs to be done in terms of relationships and people's reciprocity and mutual obligations to each other and to land. I think that's the start of it, is when we can shift this way of thinking about the world around us from sort of very late modern understandings of the world as capital, as assets to extract from. I think that's, and that's not very deep, but I think that's the first step, is like healing that. Because everyone's ancestors at some point had this very profound and salient understanding of their place within land and to take care of it. And I think the bottom line is, how do we fix that? And I think when we are able to fix that, we can heal a lot of the other sort of cultural and political traumas that are associated with that rupture that I think the world experienced at the advent of the Industrial Revolution and the Enlightenment. So a future that I envision has to be founded on that healing process. What it looks like from there maybe is a little bit more foggy, because sometimes those processes look different for different people. Every context is different. I know what I've envisioned for my community, because it's the only place I can speak confidently from. But I will say for myself is, one thing that I experienced as an Indigenous person who grew up away from their ancestral territory, feeling this sort of deep psychological guilt and hurt from that separation. I think that's something I just never want my children or their children to experience, or anyone's for that matter, right? From what I've seen from other people that are envisioning these grand ideas for my community, is this, one is sustainability, that self-sustainability that allowed my ancestors to live on an island 1,000 miles away from other places for hundreds of years, right? That ability to produce our own food and have this sort of self-contained system. I think that's a big vision that a lot of people are looking towards. But it is about self-sustainability, and it is about all systems of sustainability and sovereignty, right? Our autonomy as people, not just food, but also education. You know, we can educate ourselves. We've done it for hundreds of years. Let's do it again. I've seen like so much cool stuff come out of the leadership back home, and I'm hoping that I can be a part of it and play a role in it.